We are down on the grid of the Formula V8 3.5s. I'm joined by Keith Collantine, who has been commentating on the series since 2012. Keith, I don't know about you, but I can feel the energy is very, very high. These drivers, I just had a little chat to Mathieu Vaxivière, and I'm going to try and grab him very shortly, but he was buzzing.
Yeah, they love driving on a track like this because it's a proper track where they can really exploit the cars to the limit. These cars have got huge amounts of downforce. They're super quick through all these great corners we have at Silverstone, Copse, Maggots, Beckett, Stowe, and that's why they love it so much.
Yeah, we've got 13 drivers here, haven't we, today? So how do you think this one's going to play out today?
Well, I'm trying to think, when was the last time I stood on a grid of cars where more than half of the drivers had won a race so far this season, which is what we've had here. We've got Roy Nissany second on the grid. He was super quick yesterday. Yeah. Igor Orodchev, very, very feisty. And then a bit further back, Tom Dillman, our championship leader, really needing to fight his way forward and start claiming the big points again, because if he keeps giving away points like he's been doing in the past few races, someone is going to step out of this field and start punishing him for it.
Yeah. Now we've got Roy and Igor sitting next to each other. Yesterday they did have a bit of a coming to, didn't they? Talk us through that.
Yeah, it was, well, obviously Orodchev got up into the lead at the start from second on the grid, which is where Nissany starts today, and Nissany tried to get down the inside of him at Stowe Corner. Orodchev knew Nissany was there, maybe just didn't quite give him quite enough room. There was definitely enough room for both of them to make through side by side, but it was the closing stages of the race. There was, a win to be taken. It was always going to be a question of no quarter given.
Yeah, and I mean, how much are the gloves going to be off today, do you think? Because when I spoke to Roy, he was like, it was a driver's incident, but it is frustrating for him.
Of course it is, yeah, and we've just got Mathieu Vaxivière, our pole sitter, arriving on the grid. Big pressure on him, though, because he didn't get a very good start yesterday. He slipped down to third position at the start before we got to Copse Corner. Really needs to get that car off the line again. Well, definitely due another win.
It really is all about the start as well. Let's head down here and see if we can just have a... it would be very nice to see if we can just jump in and have a quick chat with Mathieu. I'm just going to be really interrupting. I know that you're very busy. Mathieu, you're sitting in P1 on the grid here at Silverstone. What are your thoughts? What's your strategy?
The strategy will be to win this race for sure. Yesterday we have a disappointing race. It was quite hard for us, and but yeah, I'm quite focused for today, and we will try to win.
Good stuff. Thank you very much there. Well, naturally, he's feeling confident. He's looking ahead to that first corner. It is going to be all about getting off that start line, isn't it?
Yeah, and interesting to note, he left the pits with a completely fresh set of Michelin tyres on his car, which he's managed to put a little bit of heat into on his reconnaissance lap. He's also got that rear wing cranked up for absolute maximum downforce, which is kind of what you expect to see in the pit stop race, because the driver's going to be hoping they can use their pit stop tactically to get into free air during the race and lap as quickly as they can. And take the advantage that way. They don't necessarily need to trim the cars out as much for straight line speed, because they're hoping they're going to be in clean air.
So are we going to see quite a lot of strategy when it comes to tyres today?
It's fairly straightforward from a tyre point of view, because they're limited to changing a minimum of 2 tyres. It'll basically be a question of driver's preference. But strategically, in terms of not getting stuck behind another driver and not making sure you get caught out behind a safety car, those are the really important things that the guys on the pit wall need to be really sharp about.
Yeah. So we've got Mathieu Vaxivière sitting. He'll be in his pole position. We've got Roy Nissany, who I believe is coming down. He's sitting in P2. Igor is in P3. Orodchev.
Yeah, here comes Igor Orodchev, third place for the Army car. He was going really quickly in qualifying. He held provisional pole position for quite a while, but just wasn't quite able to improve with his last lap. But he will definitely be, I think, a contender for the race win. And interesting to see just how much of those brakes he's got blanked off at the front. He's obviously trying to get as much heat into those front brakes as possible. Looks like a fairly fresh set of front tyres on his car as well. The Lotus pair are arriving on the grid next. We've got René Binder taking up his 4th place. We'll have to keep an eye out for Roy Nissany, who's going to be squeezing through into that 2nd position. But Igor Orodchev, I mean, he's taken some great wins this year, but he is quite the scrappy fighter.
He really is. He really is. He's definitely got some large kahunas, so to speak.
No shortage of bravery whatsoever, and that's what you need around a circuit like Silverstone to force an overtaking move when you need to.
And he's in cars like this as well.
Exactly. He's also in the beneficial position where he's not that far high up in the championship, so he's not got that much to lose. Really, the championship for him now is a question of bagging as many wins as possible, because that always looks really good, and he really should have had one yesterday.
Yeah, he really should. And let's face it, these top guys, they are so close, and they do need these valuable points, certainly from this weekend. because we are a halfway point, aren't we? We need them ahead to the second half of the season. We are going to try and grab Roy, who's just heading up here, currently having a great weekend. Roy, I'm just going to grab you. You had a fantastic day yesterday. You're sitting in P2. What is your strategy?
We're just gonna have a aggressive start, get to Matthew just on the start and keep my race straight ahead. As we saw yesterday, we had a good pace on the race, so I'm sure it's not gonna be too hard.
You've got Igor sitting next to you. I think it's probably a little bit too difficult to speak to him now. I love it. He's talking about the fact that he is making an aggressive start. That's what his plan is.
Well, that's what he needs to do from here. And as you saw from yesterday, you can take the lead from second place on the grid, depending on how good a start Mathieu Vaxivière gets. But again, as we said yesterday, it isn't a long run down to the first corner, so you really do need to get a good start. And it's a difficult thing to do in these cars. Very, very tricky clutches to operate. And don't forget, Louis Delatraz, a bit further down on the grid, wasn't able to get away at the start yesterday.
Start yesterday, didn't he?
Exactly. He had to go into the pit lane and start from there, and completely ruined his race. He then had some brake problems later on in the race as well, which really held him back.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's not easy to get these cars off the line, is it?
Nope, exactly. And Tom Dillman down in 6th position, our championship leader, another driver who was having problems with that earlier on in the season. We've got René Binder here. He was going really quickly in yesterday's race as well, made a couple of really good overtaking moves. And again, as we keep saying, Lotus definitely have got the setup sorted nicely. Aurélien Panis has been delivering really good solid results so far this year, not necessarily looking like he was in the hunt for victory. But here's our championship leader, Tom Dillman. And interesting to note, of all the drivers we've been past so far, Dillman is the first one who's not got his car positioned right at the front of the grid box. That's because he wants to lay down some rubber when he makes his practice start before the start of the grid proper, lay down a bit of rubber and give himself a bit better grip in order to get away.
That is a beautiful, beautiful car. We were talking yesterday about their similarities in shape, almost coming towards the Formula One style, with the licks and shapes trying to kick off the dirty air.
Well, these were very much designed around the changes that they brought in Formula One in 2011, where they have the big wide front wings and the slightly narrower rear wings. But as well as having those front and rear wings, it's actually the big tunnels at the back, just in front of the rear wheels, that generate the huge amounts of downforce. That massive tunnel diffuser really helps plant the back of the car on the grid, onto the track rather. There's Tom Dillman having a reflective moment ahead of another important race for him. He's been, gathering the points really, really nicely so far, but what we're waiting to see is whether he can get back into that constant run of podiums that he was enjoying in the first 6 races of the year.
Well, what I have to say about all of these drivers, I mean, this scene is as a feeder championship, and these boys are focused. You can see why they are on the stepping stone to bigger championships.
Yeah, and particularly Louis Delatraz, who we weren't able to get as far as. He had a slightly rough qualifying session. He came in a few laps before the end. He had really good pace in that car. He had a compromise race yesterday, as we've just said. He could be a real one to keep an eye on from 7th position. But again, we're walking past all these drivers. All 7 of them have won races so far, with the exception of Binder.
And that's the thing. Like you said, we've got a very short straight into that first corner. Copse is a flat corner as well, and we've got 7 of the greatest Formula V8 drivers sitting here itching to get to that corner first.
Yeah, and there's we just walked past Vaxivière for one last time. I do fancy his chances in this race. If he's able to get a decent getaway, I think he could be really tricky to pass.
Yeah, it is going to be all about that start. So no pressure whatsoever, Matthew. And Roy is there chomping at his heels. Look at the determination in his eyes. Yeah, and also look at how narrow the grid is. If you've got a problem with someone you have to duck around, you really have to be careful. It's not like the other start-finish line we have over on the other side of the circuit, which is really wide. There's much less room for mistake here. Yeah, well, powers are on, off the line, nice and clean, down to the first corner to Copse. I think this is going to be a very, very exciting race. Ben, over to you.